So now we're going to start getting into the meat of the lesson or the section, which is dealing with factoring. So there's a number of different ways to factor. Of course, you can always use the box method to do everything. And so it can be one method that you use and you don't have to remember all the different ways to do things, but I'm going to go through those anyway, just in case. And just so that you start learning to recognize certain things that need to be factored. So notice in this case, what I'm going to do first is you always have to move everything to one side. And then what's also important, which I didn't mention about the box method when we're going back and factoring, is that first term needs to be positive. So it's important that we make the x squared, the a, positive. So when we were talking about, looking at functions, we had, lower ax squared plus bx plus c, and we would have values for all of those. Normally you want a to be positive for you to be able to use the box method. Now, if you're using other methods, it doesn't necessarily have to be, but you want to always try to make that first thing in front of the x squared to be a positive number. And so what I'm going to have to do is move this over to the other side. So I have 5x squared plus 15x plus 5x, because I have to add it to both sides, right? Because it's negative. Okay, equals 0. I can combine those two together. So I have 5x squared plus 20x equals 0. Now I could use the box method here. And with the box method, I do have three terms. Doesn't look like I do. And I'm not counting this 0 as one of them. But I have 5x squared, 20x, and then right here I have plus 0. That's my constant term. Now it has to equal 0, so this equals 0 is irrelevant. And so in this case, because I don't have a plus 0 there, or because I do have a plus 0 there, I can actually factor out of the first two terms, the 5x squared and the 20x, and I can figure out what's common. Well, a 5 goes into both 5 and 20, and an x goes into x squared and x. So what I'm essentially doing is I'm dividing everything by 5x. So I'm going to do that. And so I take out a 5x. So if I do the division, I'm left with only an x because the 5's cancel and one of the x's cancel. I divide here, I get a 4, and the x's cancel. That still equals 0. I want to keep that equal 0 there. So what's important when we're factoring, when we're solving actually after we factored, is that we want it equal to 0, because then we set each one equal to 0. So we would set 5x equal to 0, and we would set x plus 4 equals to 0. We're going to divide both sides by 5, so we get x equals 0. I can subtract 4 from both sides on the other one, and x equals negative 4. I get two answers, x equals negative 4 and x equals 0. And that's factoring by distribution. Okay, so now we're going to do a regular factoring. So this one now we can use the box method, and we can do other methods too. I'm going to show you the other method, and then I'm going to kind of walk through the box method as well, just to kind of show you the same thing. So, and I'll explain it once we kind of get there. So I'm going to start drawing my box. Now, whenever I have an x squared term here, and I already know that I'm going to have three terms because I have to subtract 101 from both sides, I'm going to end up with x squared minus 4x. Remember, before we factor, didn't want to do that. So hold on, I'm going to write it right next to it instead of writing it up there. So I have x squared minus 4x minus 96, because 5 plus 10 plus the negative 101 is negative 96 equals 0. So it's important to have that equal 0 there. Here's my first term, my second term, my third term. So the way that you do the box method to factor. So when we were multiplying, we wrote things on the top of the columns and on the side of the rows. In this case, though, we're going to write them inside the boxes. So the first term, which is the x squared, goes in the upper left-hand corner. And the last term, so I'm going to kind of mark it. I'll do a check. And then the last term I want to put in the lower right corner. Okay, so I have an x squared and a negative 96, and that's all I'm worried about right now. And then notice that I still have this middle term here that I have to work with. And that's going to be split up into these two boxes, meaning it's going to be, 5 minus 1, -2 plus -2. But whatever goes in here has to add up to this number here. So how do I figure that out? Well, I'm going to look at the number in front of the x squared, which happens to be a 1. I'm going to multiply that by -96, which is the last term. I'm going to multiply those two together, put parentheses around them to indicate multiplication, and that equals -96. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw like a little table that has two sides to it. It has a left side, it has a right side. And because this is negative, so there's some important things about when we're factoring. We look at this term here. This sign here tells me that 1 is positive and 1 is negative. I don't know which one. Based on this, I just know 1 is positive, 1 is negative. On this side, I know that the larger number has to be negative, okay? Because when they add up, I have to get a negative number. So I'm going to put the negative on the right side and the positive on the left side. So what's important is I'm always going to put the larger number on the right side here, and I'm going to put the smaller number on the left side, which is right over here. Okay, so now, what are all the multiples of 96? Well, 1 and 96. And notice I don't have to worry about signs anymore. 2 and 48, 3 and 32, 4 and 24. Okay, 5, 6. 6 to 6 go into that. 6 goes into 90. It sure does. So 6 goes into, so it's 16. 6 and 16. Any others? 7 doesn't. 8, I think, does. Again, I'm going to put my plus and minus there. So 8 goes into 9 once, and then into 16 twice. So that would be 8 and -12. And I want to keep going until I figure out which two numbers add up to -4. Well, there they are. Okay, so that means that an 8 goes here and a -12 goes here, but I'm not done. I have to remember to put x's here because these two have to add up to -4x, not just -4. They have to add up to -4x. So those two now add up to -4x. And now I've got them in the box method. However, because there's a 1 in front, because remember there's an implied 1 there, this is actually just the answer right away. So I could, from this point, I could just have solved it. X plus 8, x minus 12, that equals 0. Anytime I have something equal to 0, I set each one equal to 0. The only time I can do this is if the whole thing is equal to 0. That's why we always make this side equal to 0. I then subtract 8 from both sides. I get x equals -8. I add 12 to both sides, and I get x equals 12, and there is my answer, okay? So that's one way to solve it. That's kind of, in a sense, just going through and factoring. That's kind of the way that most students learn. But this box method is really kind of nice because it'll also work. And now that I filled out the box, I'm going to show you how to use it. We're going to look at this first column. We're going to look at these two terms. We're going to see what's common to both of them, meaning what can I divide out of both of them that's the same. So notice this is a 1 in front, so I can't take out any numbers, but I can take out an x. So I take out an x. Over here, let's go this way now. We're going to look at the row. So what's common to these two? Well, this has a 1, this has a -12 or a 12, and I can take out another x on that side because, of course, this has an x squared, this has 1x. Then I can go here, I can say, okay, what's common to 8 and 96? Well, 8 is. So 8 goes into 96. We kind of proved that because 8 times 12 is 96. And then let's go this way and we can see, so now I'm not taking a look at any negatives, okay? So I'm only taking a look at the numbers. So what's common to 12 and 96? Well, 12 is. And then I figure out whether this is positive or negative by looking at the box that's next to it. This box right here is positive, so that's positive. I look at the box next to the 12. This box is negative, so therefore I take out a negative. So I want to be clear. This negative is only coming here because of this negative. It has nothing to do with that negative. Notice on this way, this is positive, so this is positive. We didn't care if this was a negative. So it's important to remember that one particular rule. Notice x plus 8, x minus 12. Boom, got them there. Now, which one's faster? This is obviously faster. So if you have a 1 in front, you can just do it this way, and you can figure out the answer. If there is not a 1 in front, the box method is much faster to do, or much easier and more accurate to do. And we'll get into that next.